was going to say my normal opening line is Holy Happy Hour Batman, but I forgot that last week at the end of the show, if folks were watching, I had to move my camera down a little bit to get it in the screen, and I forgot to fix that. There we go. Hey, we're live. Holy Happy Hour Batman. I am Father Ben. I'm an Episcopal priest and co-founder of the All Ports Open Network. On this show, Holy Happy Hour Batman, I am joined by heroes of the gaming and geek world to talk about all manner of things like TTRPG industry and game design philosophy, life, faith, spirituality, sometimes cocktails. If they come, we always feature cocktails, and honestly, we talk about all kinds of things in the show. It's some we have fun, and some I've realized lately, anything is on the table with Holy Happy Hour. So we will see where this conversation goes, as always, and whatever comes up. But we're so glad that you all are here watching with us tonight because we have an exciting guest. I'm very excited to be joined tonight by Jabari Weathers, who is a science fiction and fantasy illustrator, artist, designer, and more, who has done work on numerous projects, including Bluebeard's Bride and 7th Sea 2nd Edition. Really awesome projects, especially Bluebeard's Bride. Many of the people who watch the show, you'll know Bluebeard's Bride. You'll know all about it. Really awesome game, really awesome project, really fabulous illustration. So we're going to talk about that tonight. So they're going to be on the show in just a couple minutes, so stick around. Don't go anywhere. And don't forget, you can always drop your questions in the Twitch chat so that we can have a great conversation and we can answer any questions you might have. So it should be a lot of fun. Before we get into this week's episode, a couple of really important housekeeping items for the show. This show is a production of the All Ports Open Network. You can go to our website, allportsopen.com. Check out all of our podcasts and streams. You can catch up on our Monday and Tuesday night streams of The Worst Days. If you don't know what that is, The Worst Days is a horror TTRPG about being young, written by horror writer J.W.G. Wise. There are 2 bi-weekly playtest streams of The Worst Days. You can catch up on them by subscribing to APON Games on YouTube. APON Games is the game publishing branch of the All Ports Open Network, and we just finished our first itchfunding campaign for The Hard Lessons. We successfully funded a finished version of that game, a character record sheet, and 2 playset stretch goals. You can buy the game still if you go to APON Games on itch.io. And if you buy the game right now, you'll get the Ashcan edition of the game. But when the full game is released, you will get that as well. So the Itch Fund campaign is over, so you're going to pay full price for the main game, but you'll still get the final version of that main game. So go check that out if you want. And speaking of which, I'm really excited because we are now within a 1-month window, basically, of my game going live with our crowdfunding campaign. So this game is Broken, a tragic romance game. We're going to be itch funding it beginning in July, mid-July. It's a romance game for 2 players in which you tell the story of a relationship. You create characters who are in a relationship with each other, who are attracted to each other, and the dynamics of your relationship, exploring new relationship energy. But it's not just a romance game, it is a tragic romance game. It's an artifact-based game and ritual-based game where you break physical objects and break hearts too, I suppose. So that game, I'm really excited. It's my first real release for me, a game that I wrote. It's also, I like to say it's a TTRPG and a memoir because it's really a personal memoir of my own story of divorce. So I'm very excited, obviously, and invested in it. Really excited to get people on board with it. You can get notified on launch now if you just follow APON Games on itch.io. We're gonna, the night before we go live, assuming all goes as planned over the next month, you can join us on Monday, July 18th, the night before it goes live, as Jason Cordova of the Gauntlet is going to join me on this show, and we are going to talk all about Broken that night. Jason, who is awesome and has been on the show twice before, offered to come back on the show again to talk to me about my game. Like, I don't even know, what do you even say to that? That, like, just such a generous and kind offer and a really fun thing we're going to get to do on the show. So again, that's in July. So yeah, we got great stuff going on. Make sure you stay tuned and stick around for it so you can, follow everything that we have going on. If you want to learn more about Broken, go to my Twitter account, and you'll see all the stuff that I post there about it regularly. You can find like email lists to sign up for. I won't do that right now, but if you want to learn more, that's a good way for you to do that. All right, well, so it is happy hour. So what does that mean? Well, it means we do have a cocktail on the screen. All right, I'm so excited about this cocktail. So excited about this. All right, this cocktail is, I really wanted to do something special this week, and I was like, ooh, this is an opportunity to make a Bluebeard's Bride themed cocktail. And Bluebeard's Bride is such a incredible and interesting and unique game, and I thought, ooh, how could this is like both an awesome challenge, and I'm really excited about this cocktail. I wanted to make something really cool themed around that game, and I just really wanted to get it right. So whether I did or not, I don't know, but I think it's pretty cool. So I'm calling it something Blue Beard in parentheses, as you can see. It's sort of a wedding themed, like the game, sort of a wedding themed cocktail. I kind of cheated a little bit because it is based off a cocktail called Something Blue. People will feature this cocktail at their weddings. It's supposed to be cute and sweet, and so I added a bloody horror twist to it. So basically, you make your cocktail, which is boy, the text is real small on my screen, and I'm trying to remember my ingredients list for this. Luckily, I can just open my recipe card. All right, so it's a liqueur you can buy at any liquor store called Hypnotique, which is like a branded, unique liqueur. Not something I usually work with in my cocktails, but it's perfect for this drink, and it's what they use in Something Blue, and it is blue, and it's a really cool blue color, so I would advise it for this drink. So it's 2 ounces of Hypnotique liqueur, 2 ounces of sparkling wine. You can make a little wedding toast. 1 ounce of fresh lime juice, and so and then it's served with what I'm calling a bloody chaser, which is just an ounce of overproof rum and an ounce of lush grenadine. And it's made to look, the idea is for it to look like blood. I don't know how much it does, but like first what you're going to do is you're going to make your bloody chaser. So combine the overproof rum and the lush grenadine and ice in a shaker to get it really cool. You might need to get if you really want that red color, you might need to throw some real grenadine in there, some not lush grenadine, because the ice might water it down too much, so it's more pink than red. So if you really want it to be red, that's what I would try to do. But then you're gonna like set that aside, like strain it into a shot glass or a lowball glass and set it aside. And then you're gonna combine in like clean out your shaker, 2 ounces of Hypnotique liqueur, 1 ounce of fresh lime juice, ice. Shake it up so it's real cold, and then put 2 ounces of sparkling wine in a like champagne flute or a wine glass, and then pour your blue concoction in on top of it. It will be blue, and then you can do whatever you want with that bloody chaser. You can do it as a chaser, or you can, as I say in the recipe, you can just pour that red nonsense all over your glass and really make it bloody whenever you discover Bluebeard's secret. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, it means you don't know much about Bluebeard's Bride, but I can't, you're going to have to, I guess, go read about it or stick around the show. Maybe we'll explain in a minute when we talk about it, but that's sort of the idea of this drink. So I wanted to make something interesting and different and fun for Bluebeard's Bride. I hope folks enjoy. If you do try the cocktail, as always, I do ask, let me know. Tell me what you think. Love it, hate it. It's great. Tweet about it. Post on some other social media about it. Whatever works for you. All right. That's enough. Enough of just me. We are going to bring our guests on the show here. So let me go ahead and make my switch. And let's bring Jabari on the show. We can see what they think about the Bluebeard cocktail here. Let's switch it up. Oh, there we go. Jabari, welcome to Holy Happy Hour, Batman. All right, hold on. I think maybe your audio is not coming through for some reason. Let me just fix it real fast. I can hear you, but the audience can't. Hold on.
Oh.
Go ahead. Now I think they can.
Hello.
Yeah, you're good now. Hi, let's try that again. Excellent. Hi, Jabari. How are you?
I'm doing great. That that drink sounds delicious.
Yeah. So what
And
do you
I
think?
love the theater of it. I love it. I really
Yeah.
do want to try it out. And I'm not one for mixed drinks, so
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
Okay. So
impressive.
so let me ask you. Do you drink it all? Because sometimes I've guests that
I
don't.
do.
Okay.
I do. And if someone else makes me a mixed drink or offers me a cocktail, like I have some friends who are bartenders, and like I'm like, yeah, I'll totally guinea pig this. But for myself, I'll usually look for something prepackaged, like a fancy beer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm a big fancy beer drinker, so I'm curious what kind of fancy beer? Anything in particular? Like what styles do you like?
I like really dark beers.
Okay.
So like Rogue, Dead Guy Ale was like my first
Yeah.
beer,
It's a good one.
period.
Yeah.
Because my housemate was like very into like good taste beers, and then like from there, I think that like my favorite has become Old Rasputin, which is such a
Yeah.
delicious stout. Uh, Another illustrator, Omar Ryan, who does amazing work, amazing, beautiful fantasy work. I'll never forget this description of that drink. He described it as drinking. It's like drinking a tree,
Oh, that's great.
which is so accurate.
It's just
But
right
I
on
love the
point.
taste of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I like darker beers if they're I tend to like darker beers if they're bigger beers, as in like higher ABV, lots of
Hmm.
flavor. Then I really
Yes,
like dark beers. Not that I don't like say a Guinness. Like I'll drink I'll drink a Guinness, but like as
but
I
then it's
have
like
like
dark cardboard a little bit.
so I have
It's a
like
little
an I
different.
have like an Irish. Exactly, it is. It is different. I just love the really rich, flavorful dark beers that are like big imperial stouts or imperial porters. They just have so much going
Yeah,
on.
so delicious.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do love cocktails. I've been drinking cocktails less, to
Mm.
be honest with folks. I've been trying to do that. I'm trying to be healthy, so I'm trying to be careful about that. So I'm like, well, and then beer. Oh, anyway, we can go on about that all day because I could be like, well, but yeah. So this one is fun, right? Like I really wanted to have something with cool theatrics to fit Bluebeard's Bride. So
Yeah, it sounds great. How does it end up looking for you? And
yeah,
are you one to pour the chaser over or to follow up?
yeah. So I probably am a follow up kind of person.
Nice.
But you could really, if you. That's why I said so. So it does like it does. I wanted it to be cold, the chaser, right?
Hmm.
So that's why I did the thing with the ice. And actually, I don't know if I maybe I put this on the. I think on the computer screen that was up, I think I put cracked salt. That's something I decided to try, and it's
I think that's
really
there.
good. I so put. I didn't. I don't think I remember to say this. Folks who make this drink, if you make this drink, put some cracked sea salt, just a little bit, into the drink. It just like brings out. I don't know. It brightens it up. It just adds something. Anyway, that's an aside. If you, I wanted the chaser to be cold, but if you shake it up with ice like that, especially if you use lush grenadine, which is like a special kind of grenadine, it will be very light in color. It will not look like blood. It'll
Hmm.
my so if you really want the theatrics, you kind of have to use regular grenadine, but then that is super sweet. So you, it's a tough balancing act of like, I bet somebody who's better than me at these kinds of at like theatric stuff with like desserts and things could come up with something like blood, that would like really you could really drizzle over the thing to make it bloody.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And it would kind of like cut through that blue color and
Yeah.
slowly mix,
Yeah.
probably like different viscosity,
Yeah.
fun stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, because the regular like drink is a really good blue color.
Hmm.
It's like it's just a really it is like designed. I tweaked it as is because the regular something blue drink people serve at weddings is Hypnotique, white wine, and I think that's it. Maybe I'm forgetting that. It's something.
Straightforward.
Yeah, it's very very straightforward. Um, and then I customized it with lime juice and I made the wine sparkling because I know it's ginger ale. So the original something blue is 2 ounces of Hypnotique, 2 ounces of white wine, and 1 ounce of ginger ale. And I was like, that's nonsense. First of all, lime juice goes great with the Hypnotique flavors because it's like mango and something else fruity like that. And then I'm not ginger ale Like I'm not like ginger ale's fine. Ginger ale's fine for some things, but for me, I'm like, you want this to be a wedding drink, like ginger ale, like sparkling wine or champagne.
Oh
Like
yeah.
really do it up. And then I put the fresh lime juice in to kind of like cut it a little bit with the
Hmm.
juice. Um, but anyway, so there we
And
go,
I'm sure that
folks.
plays off of the salt really well.
Exactly, exactly,
Yeah. Hmm.
exactly. Well, this is one of the most. This is some of the most we've talked about the cocktail at the start of the episode, which is maybe a good sign. So, folks, again, watching this, please, if you do try the drink, let us know. I'd love to hear what people think of it. And now that it's as this is live, it's after 7:53 p.m. If you do go to my Twitter, I did post the recipe card on there, so it's already live because I timed it in advance, so people can go and check that out and see the recipe card. And yeah.
Nice.
Anyway, so Jabari, like, let's talk about you. So for people who don't know you and your work, can you give us like a little bit of a brief rundown, like who you are, like what your deal is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so I'm Jabari Weathers. You can find me and my work online, usually under Goblin Princet. That's my handle on Twitter. Goblinprincet.com is my illustration portfolio. JMW Illustration is my current Instagram, but that's soon going to be Goblin Princet just for simplicity.
You
um,
gotta get that
and
marketing synergy, whatever,
I
right?
know
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that stuff.
I know.
The
Yeah.
capitalism, it
Exactly.
hurts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm an illustrator primarily by trade, but I also do some game design and I do a pretty decent amount of games writing. For my illustration work, um, the things that I'm probably most well known for are the Seventh Sea Second Edition Sortie deck and the Bluebeard's Bride Tarot of Servants. I don't actually have any of my illustrations for Bluebeard's Bride in the main book.
Okay.
Most of the ones that are like the marketing stuff for that are actually Rebecca Yanovskaya, whose work I absolutely implore
Yeah.
anyone listening to look at because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it really is. Like the deluxe version of Bluebeard's Bride, the like hard I think it's a hardcover, I'm trying to remember. It's just absolutely gorgeous. It's stunning.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
No,
it's
but
so
your tarot
beautiful.
for it is really, really good. So if people don't know, I'll link it in the chat to your website so they can check out the tarot because your art for that tarot is freaking awesome.
Thank you. It was a whole ride. We can get into that
Yeah,
soon.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, but yeah, I've also done some work for. I've done a lot of work for like various indies, both like individual designers who I really look up to, and also various companies. And then I've done a decent amount of games writing in the last few years. Recently, I wrote a number of the haunts for Betrayal at House on the Hill, third edition, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I forgot to put
Um,
that in the intro, but I did find that when I was like trying to dig up stuff, and that's amazing. That's so cool. Well, maybe we can
Thank
talk
you.
about that too. All these things to put a pin in, but yeah.
It was a lot of fun. That team was amazing. Yeah, definitely open to talk about it some. I've written a little bit for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition on specifically Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Um, Specifically, I drafted Cartacus in that tome. So yeah, it was an honor working on that. I've done a decent amount of writing for Paizo on Pathfinder 2e. I wrote the intro for the Mwanji Expanse, as well as the cities of Jaha and Osibu in that book. And there's other writing that I've done for Pathfinder Second Edition. I've done actually the 5th part of a current adventure path going on for Starfinder right now. So those are the most notable things. And then for myself, I slowly design various things privately that I hope to release one day, but definitely work on in between, like painting for 50 hours or eking out different writing deadlines. So yeah.
Yeah, that is, I mean, a lot of stuff though. Like, so, me, I wouldn't probably give yourself a hard time for not releasing necessarily any of that other stuff that you want to get to, because, like, obviously there's a lot, you got a lot going on. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so if it's cool, what I might ask you to do is kind of like give us your. Sometimes I like to ask people their sort of. Well, it's interesting with you. Well, let's see, what's a good way to do this? Because a lot of times I'll ask people like their TTRPG origin story, which I'm definitely interested in. Like, I want to know how you got
Oh.
into TTRPGs. But there's kind of two
Uh-huh.
sides to that, right? Because you're also an illustrator, so like I am curious, like when you got it, how you got into art, how you got into illustration. So I guess answer that. You can answer one, both, like weave them
They're kind of
together.
interlinked.
Yeah. Okay.
So fortunately,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a long lineage, and I'm gonna pull in like other media
Yeah.
for sure
Oh,
to
please
answer
do.
this question.
Yeah, please.
But my history of tabletop RPGs explicitly goes back to, I think, when I was about 9 years old. My mom bought like this truncated like starter box set of Dungeons and Dragons 3.5. So it had a soft cover of the player's handbook, and then it had like all of these like monster tokens, which 9-year-old me definitely lost. And but I looked through that PHP for a really long time, up until I think the end of college. Like I had this like tattered copy of that like carried around with me. But alongside that, a lot of my gaming experience was actually through video games primarily. And that history goes back much longer. Like I would estimate that I've been doing like digital game stuff since I was 4, but it might have been earlier than that. And I think a lot of those experiences were kind of taste making for me as a tabletop role player.
Oh yeah. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, just like a lot of the like types of a lot of the worlds and a lot of the situations that I started wanting to see, but wanting to dig into in ways that you can't through pre-scripted interactions that a game is like that a video game tends to be built off of, especially if it's an older game, really informed the way, like I guess the drive to start playing tabletop stuff. Like I was like, oh, I want to be like in these fictional situations, but I want to have more options and more verbs than these games are allowing me to have.
Yeah.
And I read a lot of like gaming publications and like looked at a lot of the behind the scenes for like how developers were thinking of stuff. So like a lot of that conversation there's a lot of dreaming that feels very attainable in the tabletop space that doesn't feel very attainable to me in video games. Just because of resources. There's so much overhead compared to just playing make believe. but like the pathways to that, like I think that my tween years were really important for this, because that's when I started getting into like immersive sims as a genre, and like those take so much from tabletop RPGs and the way that they're kind of structured and the ways that they encourage the player to interact with the world and experiment with the world.
Yeah. Are there any particular immersive sims that you like stand out for you? And just curious, because sim genre is like probably my favorite video game genre. Is also, maybe that's because I'm a TTRPG person, but yeah.
I mean, yeah, like let's go into it.
Sure.
Okay, I'm gonna start with a controversial one that I think a lot of people really hate, but it was really important for me, and it was the first one that I recognized as an immersive sim. Like if I went through the timeline, there's others that had the hallmarks of it or even were, but this is the first time that I was like, this is what I want. I want more of this. And it's Deus Ex: Invisible War.
Okay.
Which everyone kind of, can I swear?
Yeah, you're good.
You're good.
Yeah,
cool. Like everyone kind of shits on this game.
Yeah.
But I love it so, and I know a decent amount of that is nostalgia.
So I've actually never
It
played
just,
Immersive War. I've only played like what is it called? Human
the
Revolution.
first one.
Yeah,
Oh,
Human Revolution. Yeah.
okay.
Right, that's the one. I think that's the one. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Human
So
Revolution is the one that it's the only one I played. So yeah, I guess you said it's controversial. So like obviously you think
so
I
a lot
should
of
check it
people
out, but
a lot of people don't like it, but I mean, like, it has the benefit of being my first, but it
yeah,
also, there's a lot of interesting stuff that's wrapped up in my experience of that game, because like it's like this was the game is sort of a mess. I think it's a great game, but it's also like sort of a mess. You can see how like the things that they were trying to do with the technology were really like pushing against the engine and pushing against the hardware that they had to fit this game onto. So like it's full of like loading screens every time you basically change a room, which is really frustrating. But it's also got like this amazing, for the time, like this amazing and kind of bonkers like physics engine that 12-year-old me would play with a whole bunch. And then when I look back on it, even though it's the writing in the game is like sort of goofy, it's also really sincere, in a way that I enjoy, and it packs so many different um, like different thematic ideas that are going to be familiar to anyone who likes like cyberpunk or most genre fiction. But like for 12-year-old me, the way that it was like delving into those things with such enthusiasm was such
yeah,
a it felt like a leap forward in like what I look for in fiction and in games.
nice, yeah.
And then my favorites,
Mm-hmm.
my other two favorites are probably Thief the Dark Project, which I'll talk about endlessly if we get on that train. But like that game, that franchise has aesthetically influenced me so much. It's in a design sense, philosophically influenced me deeply.
Hmm.
I can go into that for a long time. And then Dishonored 2
Yeah,
specifically,
yeah,
um, is just so excellent.
yeah, yeah,
And there's like I don't know, I get really emotional with games,
yeah.
which I don't think is an unusual thing, but like the things that I find myself getting like really emotional about really catch me off guard. And I'm just like, Dishonored 2 felt like a game that I felt really held by. Like I felt very trusted as
Hmm.
an audience member. I didn't feel condescended to,
Hmm.
which is kind of something that a lot of people talk about in a good immersive sim anyway.
Yeah,
But I high key felt that way.
yeah.
Like there were things that I was finding on my third or fourth playthrough that didn't feel like secret revealed behind this door. It felt like this hidden tucked away thing that
Hmm.
very naturally fit into that world, and felt like it just felt like a conversation between that team, between Arcane and me as a player.
Yes.
um
That's
and
it,
the way
right?
that I'm invited into it is so beautiful. So
That's
yeah.
it, right? That's it. That's when it's like that. It feels like it's that conversation between you and the team. And then also to me, it's like when you feel like they really made an intentional effort to make this feel like a place, like an
Yeah.
actual place.
Oh yeah.
And like when you either know that or you either get it, you either feel it, and like yes, this is it. I feels like it, or you don't. It's like
Mm-hmm.
almost like this inexplicable sort of like either it's there or it's not. You either feel like it's a real
Yeah.
place or you don't. But when they nail that feeling of like this is a real place, it's like the best feeling in video games.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that like strain of video games,
Yeah.
that lineage and that kind of thought that I think Invisible War really planted in my brain, and then like the Thief series cemented, wrapped back around into like what I wanted from my interactive media. And in high school, because I wasn't gaming much as a young child, but in high school, which was an all boys Catholic school,
Really?
was not my favorite experience.
Okay.
But there was a there was a pivotal moment in that space, in that my we had a specific like religious like theory, like a theological like theory class in my junior year, and my teacher for that class was actually also the head of the Dungeons and Dragons club.
Really?
Yes. Mr. Koth, shout out if you're listening.
So it wasn't a
He's great.
priest or or like a nun or a brother or something. It was.
No,
You
no,
said
he
Mister.
was. Yes, he was a professor.
Okay.
And but like religious studies,
Yeah.
was also a Christian.
Yeah. Like a theology professor.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. And that was the first time that I was able to sustainably play tabletop RPGs. I had a little bit of like some sprinkling with a cousin that I was very close to before then, but that was my consistent first introduction to it. And I actually didn't love playing in that space, but I did love talking to my teacher about it, and I liked the conversations that were emerging from there. From that, went to art school, which was like a very different shift, and got really involved in the tabletop club there, and started like running games, and that's where I think things like really took off in that world for me, and it's just kind of kept up since then. And I like started taking it more and more seriously. I tried to make a tabletop RPG for my thesis, and ended up making like a bunch of illustrations for it, and laying the groundwork for one of the projects that I've been returning to privately. Sure. But like it was such a, I think that was college was the time that role-playing games really got cemented as like a cornerstone in my life.
Yeah. What were you playing in college?
Ooh, so I was playing a fair amount of Pathfinder. I was playing some Call of Cthulhu. I was playing like larger name stuff generally, yeah. But then sometimes other members of the club would like find like weird indies,
yeah,
that I really dug. So like there's this game that was very Toy Story-esque called All the Little Things that we like gave a few tries of. We were playing also a bunch of homebrews. Like my friends in that group and I, like a lot of us were like designing our own RPGs, and like some of them were really broken but really inspiring to people. It was really cool to see like
it's really
them
cool.
Just as an imagination engine. And then like others were like, this system is also just very good and very coherent. And so there were a lot of those things. I was playing a decent amount of Vampire the Masquerade. There was a sprinkling of 7th First Edition as well. So kind of all over the place. A decent chunk of Changing the Lost.
Okay. Yeah.
So
yeah,
really dipping my toe in a lot of different waters.
Yeah. No, it sounds like it. I partially asked because a lot of times, like when I talk to people, it's just kind of like, and I ask that question, and we kind of get into that timeline thing. You know, one of the big things is like which edition of D&D is out at a given time. You know, so some people will be like, you know, you mentioned third edition, like they're like, oh, that was when we were playing 3rd edition, or that's when we were playing 4th edition, or that's when we were playing,
right.
You know, and so that kind of helps track timeline. And or somebody will be like, yeah, so Powered by the Apocalypse games were blowing up at that point, and so we were all playing story games. So like, yeah, it's really interesting to see. I think I love that question of like, what were you playing during a specific period of time? Because if you're like me, I don't know, what do you think about this? Like, if you're like me, I like to think of, I sort of associate periods of my gaming life with certain games. So like during this period of time, we were playing these games a lot, and I kind of like that's how I remember that period, if that makes sense.
For sure. I think I have a similar associations, because like now that I think of it, right after college was another important turn in my tabletop games. Like that's when I was really introduced to like heavy story, more heavily story gamey but mechanical games, and eventually actually like story games, parlor LARPs, like right after graduation. So it was just like another
interesting
shift since me and a bunch of art kids, like half the time we were playing really mechanically,
Yeah.
right? There was totally a place for that. But half the time we were leaning in this, like, we just want to tell stories and we want
Yeah.
to have like our own private theater.
Sure.
But we weren't using systems that like explicitly scaffolded that. Like it was really left up to our synergy and role playing and not left up to a system that would help raise people to that place, you know.
I mean,
So
like maybe this is a little controversial because like I see what the discourse is all the time about these things when it comes to rules and systems, and I really hesitate to wade into the waters of like a system matters discourse.
yeah.
But like now that you say that, like, and I think about like when we were like when my groups I was in were really role play heavy, when we were like really getting into like narrative and character development and growth, and like just like, man, when was the last time we had a crunchy session, because we have just been like these crazy roleplay sessions for weeks and weeks. Like when I think of that period of time, we were not playing like those kinds of games. We were playing games that were not really mechanically designed for that. Like they were not like a story game or like a narrative focused game. They weren't. But we did it anyway with
Yes.
with those games.
Yep.
So again, so I feel like what I'm saying right now is gonna get. I'm looking for the Twitter trolls but I to like come out of the woodwork. So I feel like it's like that systems matters discourse, but like yeah, that's just true. That's just like what we were doing at that time. So I don't know. Maybe that's controversial.
I mean, like, it's something that I can relate to. I think that there is we're playing make believe, right? You're going to run into situations that the system that you're using maybe tries to simulate, but like isn't explicitly accounting for. It's not always accounting for the emotional space that it's going to push you into in a good way, but also in a way where like you're at a certain point in campaigns, especially, I think you're going to start playing with stuff that the game isn't designed for, but does invite narratively. And I like when I think about a lot of my most emotional role-playing stuff, it's like when I was playing a little bit crunchier games, at least in the long term. I've had some interesting stuff running Bluebeard's Bride too, because that's inherently a very intense and emotional game, but it's a different that's a different page, you know. Like I can just think about like the time that we had like in parties for like longer campaigns that I've been in, where like by the end of the campaign, like we were mourning and contemplating our impending possible death in character.
Yeah, yeah.
And like and like there are games that I think like try to mechanize those conversations, and I love reading those and I want to try them. And also I think it's fascinating that a lot of people arrive at that place playing something that's more crunchy, right? I think, and so I think that there's this lack of acknowledgement sometimes when talking about more mainstream games, about like how they still scaffold these very emotional and very involved spaces and narrative stories. Like it becomes like this clash of like, I have this game that's designed to do this. How can like D&D or Pathfinder do this as well? And it's like, well, it happens all the time. Some people make their way to these other games because they know what that's like in these mainstream, like these more mainstream titles. So I don't think that that's controversial, but that's because we're not sitting on Twitter right now.
Yeah, so it's less controversial when it's not on Twitter in general, right? That's just a good rule for life. Yeah. Well, how did you end up getting involved in Bluebeard's Bride? We can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So I have to retrace my steps here. So
Yeah.
I did the sortie deck for 7th Sea. And Marissa Kelly was my art director for that. She reached back out for the Tower of Servants shortly after the Kickstarter for Bluebeard's Bride finished. as I recall, and asked if I wanted to make the tarot of servants, and I was like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
um, and that's how that happened.
Cool.
And that might still remain like the most intense um, illustration experience
Really?
that I've had in my career. Yeah, I mean, like, so Bluebeard's Bride is just a fundamentally like intense
Right.
emotional game.
Right.
Like, I just
Yeah. Yeah, so confession to everybody, I actually never played Bluebeard's Bride. Like I've read
whoa.
Bluebeard's Bride, like, and the reason why I haven't played it is because, well, the main reason why I haven't played it is because I run a game club on Saturdays and it's actually at our church where I'm the priest. But I run a game club every Saturday, and we play RPGs all the time. We play board games. We play a lot of RPGs. But we've always said like we wanted to make sure we had the right person to GM Bluebeard's Bride for the obvious reasons
Oh
of the
yeah,
subject
yeah,
matter and what it is. And like every time we've kind of started recruiting a person to potentially do that, it's just for one reason or another hasn't worked out. And so the alternative would be like if I played it at a con or something, which I just haven't done. So for that
sure.
reason, I just have yet to play it. But we've talked about playing Bluebeard's Bride forever at our game club, and it's a game that I think is incredible. From like a lot of games, all end up the way I experience them is reading the book. So like it's obviously a great game from that. Like it's sometimes it seems weird. I end up talking about a game I've never played. It just kind of is what it is. But like it's obviously an awesome game. The subject matter is really intense and cool and just yeah. I don't know. It's a really interesting and I don't know if unique is the right word, but maybe unique game.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Um, Especially, I mean, like, it's in the world of Powered by the Apocalypse games as well.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I I don't associate it with PBTA first.
Yeah.
Like even though it's the perfect scaffolding for what that game is, I think
Why do you say? I'm curious why you say that. Like why?
the
Yeah.
that is the
No. Not that it's a perfect scaffolding. Sorry, because I think that's true. What feels maybe not so PBTA about it for you? I'm just curious.
it's not that it doesn't feel like
Okay.
PBTA. It's just like that's not the first thing that I go to.
Oh, okay. I
There
see.
are a lot of like Powered by the Apocalypse games that I think are fun and interesting and
Yeah.
are playing with like cool ideas, but then like I feel how it's a little bit of a skin of Apocalypse World maybe.
Ah.
And
Okay.
here's where I'm like getting into
Yeah.
like maybe
No, you're good. You're
controversial
good. You're good.
stuff.
Yeah.
And like it's like that's speaking to like it's hard. It's really hard to escape that when you're
Yeah.
building off of uh
Yeah. So
like an engine that's working so well,
yeah.
right?
So here's what's cool but interesting to me about that, right? Like when I had Meg Baker on the show and we talked about PBTA, what
Mhm.
the insight I got from talking to Meg about like her and Vince's the way they think about Powered by the Apocalypse is so different than the way I think people design PBTA.
Oh yeah,
And so like I think actually a game like Bluebeard's Bride is like more actually what
how they
PBTA.
want it to be
Yes.
used.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It's because they're like, we want you to break it.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
we want you to like see how much it's putty,
Mm-hmm.
and like instead, a lot of what tends to happen is like the putty gets dropped into a mold, and sometimes the mold is like very sophisticated,
Yeah.
and sometimes the putty is taken out of the mold and then dried, and then you put together like a really cool action figure.
Yeah.
But like there's like something manufactured in the way that I see a lot of PBTA based designs go.
I totally agree with you.
And I that's what I mean, but I think like Bluebeard's Bride like
Yeah.
escapes that. Like I'm like, oh yeah, I
Yes.
see why this is a Powered by the Apocalypse game. And also I see its own design goals
Yep.
that PBTA didn't constrain. They just like it just helped get to those places faster.
Yeah.
And some of the interpretations of like how people interact in a lot of PBTA games, because like it just like really mesh well with what Strix and Marissa and Sarah set out to do in that play space.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no, that was great. That's why I was asking, because I was curious, because like I completely agree with you, and I get exactly what you're saying, and if it wasn't for that conversation I had with Meg, I probably would have. But I think it just changed my whole way of viewing Powered by the Apocalypse, talking about it with her, because seeing it from her perspective just changed the way I thought of it completely. It just made me like it blew my mind in some ways, because it like just made me see like there's just so I don't even know how to put it into words, but like what their view of what PBTA is just like it's not the mechanical specifics of that people think of as PBTA design, right?
No,
that's not what they think of as being the heart of what makes it Powered by the Apocalypse.
It's not moves and 2 dice,
right?
It's like, how is this conversation being facilitated, and
yes.
how is this chaos being whipped up so that like this how is the snowball being built up so that it can keep rolling down the hill and building steam? Yeah, it's like,
yeah. And I hope we like the TTRPG RPG scene digs more into that, like, because there is probably just a freaking like richness of wealth of like to mine there, you know what I mean? Like there's probably just so much to be done. Sorry, my corporate device in the corner that's listening to me keeps thinking I'm talking to it for some reason tonight. I don't know what's going on with that. Echo, stop. It keeps thinking I'm referring to it, and then it keeps talking at me, and I can't hear it because I got these headphones on, so it's just corporate overlords. They don't like our conversation. I don't know.
Spooky.
Yeah.
Talk about creativity. Let's quell it.
Yeah. But yeah, so no, I was just that's really interesting to hear your insight into Bluebeard's Bride. But like I said, the tarot work you did is the design for that is really cool and intense.
Thank you.
It's just really awesome. It's just
of the cards that you've seen, do you have a favorite?
Oh yeah, I can't say that I do, because there's some.
Do you have
really
one that creeps you out the most?
Yeah, probably some of the ones, because I'm just like looking at the ones here on the web. There's the one with the, I don't know, the like coins for the eyes and the coin in the mouth is pretty crazy.
3 of coins.
Yeah. Okay. The one, the like anything that's like cooking, where you're like, what is that meat that the person's cutting or whatever? Anything that's like that is creepy as all get out to me. Yeah, so that's kind of the stuff that weirds me out, I guess. Like, is this person dead? Or the biting of the coin, like anything with a mouth like that. It's just like, if it's, especially if it's like super close up, it's like too close. It's just like uncomfortable. Like one of the things I like about the design of them is that it's like some of them, nothing about it should be messed up or fucked up, but like it is anyway. I don't know. I am not an artist, so that's my like not nuanced way of describing that. But like, it's like, why is this so disturbing? I'm not sure, but it really is, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the needle I was trying to thread, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of Bluebeard's Bride is about normalization, you know, like patriarchal normalization, about these like fucked up gender dynamics prominently, right? So I was trying to like really make those images fizzle with that tension, and like, as much fun as it was to work on those images, like part of what was like really hard about it as well was like, you know, being socialized male, even though I'm agender, like I'm like, oh, like I'm explicitly kind of the villain, or I see the ways that I'm complicit very explicitly in all these, in like a lot of these situations, and some of the art direction that I was receiving, and with the number cards, like I had a lot of room to like just make up those images myself, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna like go through my mental library of like horrors and just uncomfortable moments that are small but feel really horrific and intense to live in. Yeah, so you can probably imagine what it's like for me to run that game a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah, well, I am curious. Like you mentioned, being a gender and being someone else socialized male, and then like how what's it like to run that game with that sort of life experience? Is that yeah? What's that like?
um, Implicative,
Interesting.
which it should be. I
Yeah.
think it like I mean like I that's one of the things that I love about the game in general. Like, no matter who you are, it's implicative. Like, I think that there's a lot about even internalized misogyny that explicitly is pointed to in the text of that game. So
Yeah.
if you're a woman and you're playing, like, it's the game has insights for how everyone connects to patriarchal violence, and they're really smart in that way. But like, I run like it's really weird, in a way that I value deeply to be running it as like an AMAB agender person.
Yeah.
And like, there's a lot of times when when I'm going through like figuring out a horror, figuring out like what kind of room I want to like throw at the group, or figure out like what kind of conversation that I want to pull, that like I'm just like going through either my past experiences, like where I felt really pressured to like perform masculinity, or I like
Yeah.
knowingly or unknowingly like participated in that without any prompting. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's intense. Like, it's like there's a point where like I kind of had to like step away from running uh that game in 2019 because I had like a lot of intense personal stuff happening in that year. And like, I don't think that that's a game that you should run if you're not in a good headspace, period. I've seen some people try to brute force running that game, and I'm like, no. Like, I've talked to multiple people at conventions and been like, if you're not in a good headspace, please don't run this for other people. Like, please take care of yourself. And
Yeah.
um,
Well, that's something I
because
hadn't
it's
really thought about for convention play with that game, which I'm just not just didn't really process it. But like, yeah, that's a pretty intense game to run at a con. Period. Right? To like sit down with people you don't know, and like
yeah.
both from both sides. So like a lot of trust that this GM is going to run this in a way that's going to be okay. Like that's
Yes.
yeah,
And at the same time, like, there's a lot of um honesty in like the level of reality that or at least that I like to bring to the horrors of that game. um it means like having hopefully like a comprehensive uh and detailed conversation about everyone's boundaries at the table, what to
yeah,
expect. It's like there's a lot of me talking about like, here's how I ideally run this, and also I don't have to go this intense. um but like, sometimes even when you prime your table with that, like, on one hand someone's like, oh yeah, I'm ready for this like intense experience, and then like when they're actually in it, it's like, we have to like recalibrate. So hope like making sure that your table has those tools is really important. And I've seen I've run tables where like we'll set up these various like safety tools, um in order to like protect everyone's like kind of well-being at the table outside of the fiction. And once those things are set up, like, I've had some players, uh always men, uh like not engage with those tools at the outset, and then like really run into the conversation of the game by the end of it.
that's
Like, and
fascinating.
it's valuable too. Like,
Yeah,
I one of my favorite sessions that I ran at PAX East involved, like, that table was wonderful. Also, like, those, all of the players there were really great. Even this guy that was like really resistant to like when I was like giving my spiel about like what are our lines and veils, and like make sure that you use the X card if you're feeling like
yeah,
not great about the direction that things are going. And like, like let's really talk about like our boundaries before we get into the fiction, because like I want to know the places that I can go, and I want to know like the places that I should hold back. And like there were a few different moments where this player was like trying to be like disaffected, and it wasn't in a exactly malicious way, but it was like I'm like kind of above like the things that you're throwing at me and the horrors that you're throwing at me. And then like near the end of the game, um he you've read through the game, right? So
Yep.
he was playing the Patal,
Yeah.
and she has one of the faces that she has, one of her face moves is the mistress, where she can like wrest the ring of subservience away from another player in order to take control of the situation. And for those who haven't played the game or haven't read through it, the ring of subservience determines like who is kind of piloting the bride, like who is actually like actualizing her actions in the world, and all the other players are kind of like different aspects of her personality
Right.
that are figuring this out in her head and like her emotional state. So he took control of the bride at the very end of the game, while the other player who was playing the mother, and who was I think the only woman at this table, was like, hey, like trying to explain at the end of the game like to her village like the horrors that had befallen their table at Bluebeard's manor. And he was like, I'll explain this, and proceeded to like talk about this situation. And like before, like when he used the move, like I did pause for a second and I looked to the other player, because I was like, this is like weirdly mimicking the power structures and sort of like entitlement to being heard that this game is critiquing. So I paused for a minute, looked at her, kind of was like, there was like a like, is this cool? Like, and like she was fine with it. Like I think I was honestly like more defensive about that moment. Uh, so he's explaining like all these different horrors to the constable of the village, and I'm like nodding my head, being this guy, and then like I start shaking my head, and I'm like, well, where was your husband in all of this? And like, I started like asking all these really terrible questions that you don't ask like traumatized people.
Yeah.
But the world does ask traumatized
Yeah.
women all the time.
Yeah.
And out of like, you could see like the meta breakdown on his face. He was just like, wait, like they don't believe me about this. Like they're not listening to me. Why are they asking these questions? And he eventually was just like, well, okay, if this is like how this is going, then like the bride must have gone insane. Like I just like don't believe this. But the game like is this insidious depending on like the group's or I should say, is this honest
Yeah.
about how the world can treat you?
Yeah. Right.
In your patriarchal trauma.
Yeah.
So like I'm just committing to that. And like we talked about it after the
Okay.
game. Like I sat with him for 20 minutes, and like it was actually a really good conversation. But like it was just like watching him process this while I'm like asking the final questions of the game with everyone else.
Yeah.
And it was surreal, and it was like the best expression of what that game could be, but also like one of the most like precarious. Like I was like, wow, this could have gone really wrong in a different way. Fortunately, the conversation that we had afterward was good, but like we had a debrief. Like I debriefed with that player for 20 minutes.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah. That's like, see, that's the kind of special shit that only happens for really deep game. I mean, that's, yeah. I mean, I just started realizing, I don't mean to be pejorative of other games, but that's like some special shit that can come out of a game. That's what you love about. I guess what I'm trying to say is, that's what I freaking love about TTRPGs, right? Like,
Yes.
when they can make you get to that space.
Oh yeah, yeah. And
know?
like I've arrived at that in games that are not inherently as like drenched in responsibility
Yeah.
and and
Yeah.
just thematic weight as Bluebeard's bride.
Right. Well,
You
there's
know,
not that
but
many,
like
honestly, that are. There's few that
it's
are. Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
It's like maybe red carnations on a black grave is approaching that. There's a few others, but
Right.
like, but you know, like I've gotten to that like spaces that felt that emotionally profound
Mm.
and complex from other places. Like I remember shortly after college playing like this long homebrew campaign with a bunch of friends who were also like my gaming friends for a while, and like some of us were moving away and some of us, you know, like there were big changes in our lives happening because like some of these members of this group were like a year behind me, so they were still in college, but they had plans to like move away from town when they graduated, and I had just like gone through that but stayed in town. Some of the our GM was a year ahead of me, but he was still like living here, but like was getting picked up for like a concept art job in a different country. So like we got to like uh the penultimate session of this campaign, and like I remember like actually like both like crying actually a little bit, like welling up, um but also it was completely appropriate for my character to be crying, so I just was like, I'm gonna just role play through this if everyone's cool with it, because we were getting ready for like our big fight with like this like alien and like this like eldritch alien invasion. It was a wild campaign, but like also
Yeah.
very epic fantasy kind of thing.
Sure.
And a lot of the conversations we had in that session were about like contemplating our deaths and like, are we going to make it out of this, and like, will our characters see each other after this, are we going to survive this? And it just like, no one was like going like threatening to die from moving away, but like there was just this interesting parallel between what was happening in our actual lives and
Yeah.
like what was happening there, where like, you know, some of us might not talk with each other as much anymore just by consequence of living in different places, even though there
Yeah.
was like a lot of deep care that was forged by this game.
Yeah.
And it was cathartic to now acknowledge that in the fiction, sort of.
Oh, that's really, yeah, that's really incredible. I mean, part of the reason why I started this show was because, uh, like, I think that both TTRPGs and when it's when it's a certain version of religion can both kind of like invite people into those kinds of spaces where they can like have those kinds of experiences you're talking about.
Right.
And it's interesting to me the commonality between those two things, which was kind of why I started this show, right? Like it's like they both of those like things can invite you into having, I don't know, exploring. I mean, in that case, it's like it's like using play to manifest this like and process and look at in different ways these experiences that you and your friends were having.
Absolutely.
And I hope that religion does that too when it does it well. I mean, obviously religion could also be traumatic, but then again, so can tabletop role-playing games.
Role-playing games.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So
yeah, if you're not careful.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they can be cathartic in the way, like both
Yeah.
of these things can be. This is something that I reflect on a lot, right? Because like when I look back on my experience in specifically high school, like
Yeah.
this is I went to Catholic school from like from first to 12th grade, and
So a lot of
some of those
Catholic
experiences
school.
were good,
Yeah.
but like high school in particular was a traumatic time, and at the same time, I think I had shades of this leading up to high school, and weirdly in elementary school that was like the most free thinking of the schools that I went to, but like in high school, my religion teacher at the time, Mr. Koth, even though we had different perspectives about Christianity and about how religion operates, and like we were landing in different places in our relationship to Christianity and Catholicism, the conversation that we had was really valuable to me, because he was not very institutional about it. Like he was very personal about it, even when we would disagree about stuff. I think that he really upheld the importance of me and other students in that space thinking for themselves and really forging their own relationship with religion, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
Which honestly ran counter to the larger space in a lot of ways, where like you're just kind of asked to conform. And I think that's like where a lot of the trauma comes from, and like a lot of traumatic, now that I think about the parallel between games and religion, like traumatic tables are usually like when your agency is denied. And not challenged, you know, like Bluebeard's Bride is a game all about like denying this fictional avatar agency, but I think in some ways it really reveals and I feel this way about a lot of horror media and like challenging media, like the act of participating in that very fully can be very affirming of our agency as players and as storytellers, and of our experiences and like our responsibility in maybe like mirroring situations and how we like connect to like patriarchal stuff, right? Like in some ways, like they're like Bluebeard's Bride asks you to like take hold of your agency in like things that we should not be proud of, or things that we like paper over or ignore, because it's like, hey, this is stuff that we like, that half the population goes through all the time, and somehow you're connected to it. You can't turn away from it. And I think that's actually like what scares some people off from playing that game. And it's something that I really value there. Like it's like, so the opposite of that, you know, like the packaging up and the hiding away completely of that agency is I think like where a lot of my own religious trauma comes from, and where I see a lot of other people like have like a similar experience. And it really mirrors how people talk about like traumatic experiences that I've seen folks have at like in gaming, where it's like I had a really abusive GM who just like, you know, like had me sit down at the table and then manipulated my existence in that fiction without my consent.
So I'm just thinking about how control is really like, right, in both, in Bluebeard's Bride, as you pointed out, it's this game about control, right, where like that's what the game is about in some ways, right? We're taking away the agency of the person and control, and so it gives you agency and control in order to explore that theme in interesting ways, right? And then just thinking about how like in religion, I don't know, like there's this, wait, just struggling to put it into words exactly, but like because what your teacher did, and what someone who is, whether they're a theologian or whether they're a church pastor or priest or whatever, or whether they're just anyone who's a religious leader, like when I think of like what that looks like in a way where I think it's healthy and life-giving and good, right? It's like not about control at all, right? It's about empowering people to like explore this and develop your own relationship with it, whatever that's going to be at the end of the day, right? And that takes a willingness to like not control, right? It takes a willingness to like say like, I just wonder why it is that we react out of fear, because I know it's got to be fear-based, to like insist on control, insist on conformity. Like why so often that's like, I'm not trying to badmouth Roman Catholic schools, right? But we happen to be talking about them here.
Yes.
But I try to be careful what I say about my colleagues in other denominations or whatever. So like, because I say that because, hey, we have skeletons in our closet too. We're not perfect, so so this isn't about bad mouthing them. But I hear a lot of stories of people who go through Catholic school and say, my experience was it was all about conformity. It was all about having to believe exactly certain things. It didn't matter whether it wasn't about me exploring those things. It was just about me conforming to those things, right? I hear that so often, and I just wonder, like, what is it about what is it about, what's so scary about that makes us need to control and have that uh, uh, like control. I'm failing to put it into better words than that, but like, what is it that we're so afraid of that makes us need to try to force control and conformity, and rather than letting people explore and play, like actually play with
Yeah.
it, and then see what comes out of that, like what, I don't I don't know.
I mean, that's why play is so important.
Yeah.
Something something that's all like gonna stick with me forever. That Janaea Kemper actually said, who's another game designer scholar. She's amazing, by the way. So definitely look up her stuff. I remember my first time going to Metatopia, uh, in a conversation about game design, uh, for a show. Um, I think it's Kicking It with the King with Gerald King. He's a board game designer, really cool guy. Um, he he was interviewing a lot of the Black designers that were attending, uh, at Metatopia, and we got into the weeds of just like talking about like game design and like why is play important. And Janeo was like, yeah, I mean, like play is instrumentally educational. Like play is like how people like figure out like their social norms and like figure out their own agency and figure
Yeah.
out like
Yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
stifling play, um like is really detrimental, not just like in a child but just like in people.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is like, but especially like with children who are allowed to play fully, um like have tend to have like better senses of the world, like because they're given the space to like actually contextualize that for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know why like there's so much fear
Yeah.
that provokes people to squash that down.
Yeah.
And I don't always, what's sad is like as I get older is like I don't think that it's just fear. I think that's frequently the case.
Yeah.
I think that's frequently the case in the way that my school was set up,
Yeah.
for sure. But I also think that sometimes it is just like power. Like I think it's just like, I think there's just like a sadistic enjoyment.
Yeah, that's really dark. And I'm not saying it's not true, but I'm saying it's really dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things I've, one of the conversations I've had recently with someone about this kind of thing is that, who's in theology, is that like so often, so much of religion is like, we were just talking about this over the weekend actually at church, but just so often so much of religion is like, I'm okay, we're all okay here, like hymns, the things you do in church, it's like, hey, we're okay, are you okay? You're
Mm-hmm.
okay because you're here, you're inside, and you're literally inside because you're like inside this building, inside this worship space, inside this church, so you're okay because you're one of us, and that makes you okay. And them out there, those people, they're scary, they're not okay, they're not one of us, and maybe they're so not okay that they're going to burn in hell forever, depending on your like religion and your viewpoint, right? And like, it's all about, like, sometimes it's all about that. It's all about like, we're okay in here, they're not okay out there. It's just like a way to make us versus them, a way to otherize people that aren't the same as us, or in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
And we just do that over and over and over again. And the fact that, to me as a religious person, the fact that religion gets used that way is heartbreaking. Like, it's because I've experienced religion, like we're talking about with TTRPGs, right? I've experienced it where it can be so life-giving and so fulfilling and eye-opening to like the vastness of the universe, and like the commonality between all things, and like the way we're all interconnected with each other. And like, when you have those moments in religion, those things that I think are like numinous moments, where they're like, experiencing something so much bigger than yourself, it's the greatest thing in the world. That's why I wanted to go into religion and be a priest and play role-playing games for what it's worth. But
yeah. I have like multiple different questions like brewing around in my head, because I want to know, like, similar to how you were asking me about like like what is the genesis of my role playing history?
Yeah.
Like what was your like what's
Oh.
your religious journey?
Oh man, I don't think we can. I don't see. This has happened a couple of times in the show where we end up. It's almost like we end up having a conversation, almost like a reverse interview. Suddenly we turn the. I don't think I could answer it in a brief enough
That's fair.
time
It's a
to
big question.
to that we would have enough time to get into it. But I'll say I will answer it because I don't want to be in brief, which is the move from growing up in a fundamentalist evangelical background to becoming Episcopalian, and like that is the short version of my journey. Is like I was in a very controlling very like, so speaking of the themes of Bluebeard's Bride we were talking about, I mean, like the church I grew up in,
Hmm.
and I always, even though they don't watch the show, I always think about like my mom and my parents when I talk about this, because they are also Episcopalian now. Like they've moved out of that old world, but part of me is still like, oh, like I hesitate, and it's a shame. I shouldn't hesitate to criticize such an awful version of religion because it is terrible. Because the
Yeah.
religion I grew up with, like women literally had to have their head covered to show subservience in church. They weren't allowed to speak, like, or lead prayer or lead out loud if men were around, like involved. And like that's the kind of like environment that I grew up in with religion, was like very much like like women
Yeah.
cover their heads and can't speak public. Like that's the kind of religion I grew up with. So very for people watching who may be curious, it's I grew up Plymouth Brethren, and specifically there's open and closed Plymouth Brethren, they call them, and I actually grew up in the one that's called open, which is kind of nuts that they call that version the open one. I know it's crazy. Well, closed Plymouth Brethren, those people like wouldn't have, like I would have, they don't use television, they don't watch television, like movies, like music that's not their music, things like that. So that could have also been me. It wasn't. Like I
Hmm.
thankfully grew up with a lot of, my parents luckily were like very much willing to let me I mean, I got into role playing games, played D&D in high school, things like that. And the church I grew up in did do some pushback on those things. Like I remember a youth pastor telling us that Harry Potter was evil, which is in hindsight now, like that we've all come full circle on.
Feels weird with
It's like a
with Joe
weird,
Rowling, and
right?
yeah.
It's a weird. I hadn't thought about that actually till right this moment, but that is a weird circle that we have now come made on it. But for very
Right.
different reasons back then. But yeah, so that was kind of my religious background. I mean, like that's what I grew up with. But like, I think that I could have become an atheist, or become a non-religious person, or become, I don't know, when I say atheist, but I think I could have ended up in a very different place, maybe depending on
Sure.
what happened to me after that. But because that framework, the worldview that was constructed, that I was told I had to conform to, like we were talking about and believe in
Hmm.
growing up, it was not going to hold up to any scrutiny at all.
Sure. Yeah.
The moment I was outside of it and experiencing the world for what it
It was gonna
was.
crumble.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I'm a Christian now, and I'm an Episcopalian now, and a priest now because I
Hmm.
happen to be in an environment that fostered the kind of thing you were talking about. I mean, I even had a specific teacher, right? Like I had a professor in college who very much was the one to be there to like catch us when we fell. He was very good at like listening and being open-minded and talking about religion and philosophy and in
Hmm.
very fun and open-minded ways that let us play in that space and explore it. And like every question was okay, and we were gonna, hey, let's poke holes on this from all sides and see where we come to.
Yeah.
And because of that, I was able to find a version of religion that worked for, that I believed in, and that I kept having religious experiences that are like the ones I was talking about, which I find to be life giving and empowering. Anyway, so that. Even though that was not a short version of the answer, that is the short
It's
version.
great
I
though.
think of the answer. Thank you for asking. It's
Yeah.
very kind of you
Yeah,
to
no, I
ask.
mean, like I'm very I was really curious about it. Also cool that you're Episcopalian. My elementary school is Episcopalian, and like that is the school of the three that I have the best memories of institutionally.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, when we're not
Yeah,
on,
so I'm like, this
well,
tracks.
well, I won't. Off air, I'll have to ask you about that. I'm curious, like where, what Episcopal school, whatever. We could
Cool.
talk about that off air, so I'm
Totally.
not doxing you or whatever. But yeah. Well, listen. So, like, with the little bit of time we have left, man,
Mhm.
this time slot flew by tonight. I feel like we
Yeah,
only scratched the surface of some of the stuff I wanted to get into with you. Um,
it's been
but
great though.
yeah, thank you. It's been really, yeah, it's been a really awesome conversation. I am curious what you're working on now. Like, where are you kind of going? What direction are you going in right now with work? What stuff you're working
Ooh,
on?
ooh. Okay, so what can I talk about? NDA is hard.
Ah, yes,
um,
yes, that happens on the show
however,
sometimes too. Yeah.
however, let me pour through these things. Um, well, okay, so recently I had some illustrations spoiled, or an illustration spoiled for an upcoming Dungeons and Dragons release.
Really?
Journey. Yeah, so I have some art in Journeys through the Radiant Citadel,
Yeah.
and one of my character illustrations is spoiled for that. So
Cool.
excited for the world to see the other two
Nice.
soon. Uh, those are my first illustrations for D&D, which is really funny because I've written for D&D before I've illustrated for D&D, despite
That.
working as an illustrator
Wow.
for much longer than being a writer
Yeah.
publicly. Um, so there's that. There is some Paizo stuff that's on the horizon
Cool.
that's been in the can for a minute, but I think it's getting released soon, and I think it's been announced. So, let me Google this just to make sure. Before.
Yeah, no, please do. Yeah, that's so funny. Um, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So I have an adventure in the Dark Archive supplement for Pathfinder Second Edition.
Cool.
Um, and then there's other things that I don't think I can talk about much
Yeah,
as I
sure.
wish that I could.
Right.
And there's some personal stuff that I'm getting back to.
Yeah.
There's a minute when I was like, I really miss designing my own
Yeah.
games, and
Yeah.
like I'm like very forcefully trying to like eke out that time again. Like it's been a little bit difficult because like in the pandemic I've been through two moves and one move
Oh.
right before it. So like
Oh.
the I'm like in a more stable place now to
Yeah.
like focus on my own stuff and not just my freelance work.
Gotcha.
And so I'm clawing my way back to hopefully getting one of my early, like one of my role playing games done, and the one that I'm most excited about completing, and the one that I've probably tested the most, is a game called A Dire Situation. It's
Mm.
an epistolary role playing game that's inspired by. Are you familiar with the novel or the film Dangerous Liaisons, or the play?
Oh, like vaguely. Like I'm aware that it exists, but yeah.
It is horrible French aristocrats playing social games,
Yeah,
and
I
the
love the
the
subject
novel
matter. That's great.
the novel is epistolary. It's all
Mm.
conveyed by letters between the characters. So I was like, I want to make that a role playing
I
game.
love
So
that.
Dire Situation is it's like the succinct way of putting it is it's a perverse game of telephone.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of fun playing it. Like basically everyone is playing like these social games and mostly writing letters to each other,
Yeah.
except for at the highest points of tension in the game, when you stir up a scene with someone else. And those are usually like the pivotal points when someone's status is going to be affected and maybe they'll be toppled to
Mm.
ruin. So like that's what I'm gearing back up into working on. It's been a little bit on ice for a few years because of the tumult of the pandemic
Yeah.
and like just freelance commitments, but I'm
Yeah.
excited to dive back into it.
Cool. Well, I can tell you, I can relate. We're in the middle of a move right now, so like I
Oh,
spent most of my day today like getting the new place ready to move into, like getting boxes to the house I'm in right now. This was a box kingdom in here, but where I'm at right now, but the boxes have now all moved. So now it'll be more boxes, more.
that's
So
relatable.
it is, yeah, exactly. But I will say, I did hear in this conversation though, like I can just kind of hear your eagerness to want to go back to designing your own games. Like I can hear your hunger for it, whenever you mention it. So that tells me something. Like I can sense your creative desire, your creative energy for that.
Oh yeah.
It's exciting.
Yeah, no, I guess I didn't mask well enough, but that's probably a good thing.
No, it
It's a good.
is. Yeah.
I'm glad that you're picking up on it too.
Yeah.
So like, I'm really trying to cultivate that energy. I'm really trying to like honor it.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say. I hope
Yeah,
you, and I hope you can. I hope you'll be able to. And I'll
I
watch.
think I will.
I'll look for that because I love the epistolary game thing. I think that's really cool. And I've played letter writing games before, but I haven't. I'm trying to think if I played any. I haven't played any that are like what I love about what I hear in yours is like the sort of, maybe this isn't the best phrase for it, but the sort of Game of Thrones esque like
Yep.
social, like doing that with letter writing like sounds so good. Like that sounds so fun.
Yeah,
So
it's a hilariously dark game for that reason,
yeah,
and
that's awesome.
it's built 100% around like, you know, in a movie when you're watching like a character that you either really like or really dislike, uh you're watching a character holding a document that you know they shouldn't have access to, and just like the anxiety of watching them read
Yeah.
and like have this new like that's 100% what this is built around,
Oh,
because
oh,
like everyone's reading these
oh,
letters to each other at the table, and sometimes
oh,
like people are intercepting letters that are meant for the
yeah.
person next to them,
Oh
so
my
it's just
gosh.
like,
It's so good. It's like, oh, that if you can capture that feeling in a game, oh, that's
so
awesome.
I'm aching for it, and like
Yeah.
I was playtesting this so hard in
Mm,
2019, and like
okay.
a lot of those tests had that energy. So I'll keep you looped about it
Yeah, I
if you'd
would
like.
love to know about it. Yeah, absolutely. And also, again, as somebody that's like my game that's coming out in July is something that I've been playtesting and working on for years, and I had to like set it aside for a little bit and then come back to it, and like I just know what that feels like too, of like really wanting to get this thing out there, like really wanting to finish it, really wanting to get it to people to play, and that's a like, yeah, I can relate to that feeling. Like it's a powerful feeling. Like so.
It sound Broken sounds beautiful, by the way. I do
Thanks.
want to look into it if it's available
It's we
online,
could
or are they?
let's talk off air about it, and we can,
Sure.
and I can plug you into it. All right. Well, one last time, I know you said at the top of the show. Do you want to tell people like where to follow you on socials and stuff?
Yeah, you can follow me at Goblin Princet on Twitter. Princet spelled Princete. That's also my portfolio website, so goblinprincet.com.
Cool. And on as far as YouTube watchers, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, check the show notes. All those details will be there in the show notes. So Jabari, thank you for coming on Holy Happy Hour. I deeply appreciate you making the time to come on the show.
Thank you for having me on, Ben.
I'm
This
gonna
was wonderful.
thank you. It was. I mean, it was wonderful having you on. The conversation was a true delight. I'm gonna ask you to hang out. I'm gonna ask Jabari to hang out in my little digital green room here, and I'm gonna take our viewers back to just me and just wrap up the show really quickly here. Just a couple of goodbye stuff. All right. So huge thanks again to Jabari for coming on the show. Wow, that was such a really good conversation. That conversation we just had on this show reminds me of the first episode we had with Alex Roberts, like episode 1 of the show, which is very similar sort of in its depth about what it means to play games and the space you can get into with them and everything. So this was a true delight episode. If you only caught part of it, if you jumped in at any point here, you're watching, at any point you want to watch the whole thing, you can. You're good. This whole thing will be video on demand on Twitch when it's over. But you can also head to allportsopen.com, watch every episode of the show afterward. You can subscribe to Holy Happy Hour Batman on YouTube, where you may be watching this now, and if so, awesome. And you can watch all of our episodes, our back catalog of guests there on YouTube. Let's see, what else do I want to say here at the end? Huge thanks to Joshua Wise, my APON co-founder, for the artwork on the stream and for everything he does for our network to keep it running. Thanks to Doctor Octoroc for the use of his music on the show. And I feel like I'm forgetting a housekeeping thing at the end, but that's fine. I'm sure you'll figure it out. So, all right, I'm That Gamer Priest Ben. Come back next week. We have another great guest. We have a game designer coming on the show. Amanda P., the designer of a really great solo game called Pilgrimage of the Sun Guard. And so if you haven't checked that out, you can go to Itch and check it out. It's a really awesome solo game. Highly recommend. Amanda's going to be joining the show. Amanda's also a Philly person like me, so that should be fun. Talk about have another Philly game. Had lots of Philly game designers on the show. I have another great Philly game designer on the show. Next Monday, that's the 27th at 7:30 p.m. Same bat time, same bat channel as we always do here on Holy Happy Hour Batman. So, all right, friends, enjoy the holiest and happiest of hours. We're not raiding into anything tonight, so we will see you all really soon. Thanks for watching. See you next week.